June 14th, 1945. The war in Europe had been over for 5 weeks, but inside Interrogation Room 3 at Camp Livingston, Louisiana, a different kind of battle was about to begin. One that would change how America thought about its enemies forever. Sergeant William Tucker sat across from Hauptmann Karl Richter. Between them, a scarred wooden table. On that table, a white ceramic plate, 3 fried eggs, sunny side up, 6 strips of bacon still glistening with grease, 2 pieces of toast with real butter melting into golden pools, a cup of coffee, black steam rising like a ghost in the humid Louisiana air. Karl Richter stared at that plate like it was a bomb ice about to explode. His hands trembled in his lap. The iron cross pinned to his gray naval uniform caught the light from the single bulb overhead. His face was hollow cheekbones, sharp as broken glass. He had not eaten real bacon in 4 years, maybe longer. He could not remember anymore. Bill Tucker pushed the plate forward, just an inch. The scrape of ceramic on wood sounded loud in the silence. He said nothing at first, just waited, watching, the way you watch a cornered animal unsure if it will run or bite. "Go ahead, Captain." Bill's voice was flat, Southern drawl softened by 3 years of Army discipline. "It's real, no tricks." Carl's eyes snapped up, blue eyes bloodshot, exhausted. "You are trying to break me with kindness." His English was good, accent thick as fog but understandable. "I will not." His stomach growled, loud, undeniable, betraying him. Bill's expression did not change. He leaned back in his chair. The wood creaked under his weight. He was a big man, farm strong, Georgia clay under his fingernails even after 3 years of war. He folded his arms across his chest, waited. Carl's hand moved, slow, like he was reaching for something holy or dangerous. His fingers closed around the fork, metal against skin, cold, real. He stabbed one of the eggs. Yolk broke, golden, running across the white plate like liquid sunshine. He lifted it to his mouth. The taste hit him like a punch to the gut. Salt, fat, protein, real food. Not sawdust bread, not turnip soup, not ersatz coffee that burned your throat and left you emptier than before. Real, American, abundance. Karl Richter, commander of U-Boat 534, who had sent 8 Allied ships to the bottom of the Atlantic, who had killed over 400 merchant sailors in the name of the Third Reich, who had survived the sinking of his own boat and the deaths of 49 of his crew, closed his eyes and wept. But let's go back to the beginning, because this story is not just about one German captain crying over breakfast. This is the story of how Doughnuts defeated Nazi ideology, how a Southern sergeant taught a naval officer what America really means, and how the greatest weapon in World War II was not the atomic bomb. It was kindness, simple, unexpected, devastating kindness. This is the story of the last good war, and how we won it twice, once with bullets and once with bacon. But first you need to understand what Karl Richter was hiding in his boot, and why Sergeant Bill Tucker was about to risk everything to save the life of a man he was supposed to hate. The arrivals May 15th, 1945. Camp Livingston sprawled across the pine forests of central Louisiana like a small city made of wood and wire. 500 German prisoners already called it home. Another 18 were about to arrive. These were different. Officers, naval commanders, U-boat men, the wolves of the Atlantic. High-value prisoners, the kind that made intelligence officers salivate and politicians nervous. Sergeant Bill Tucker stood outside the processing barracks watching the road. Dust hung in the air. It had not rained in 2 weeks, and the red Louisiana clay turned everything the color of dried blood. He was 27 years old, tall, broad across the shoulders from years of throwing hay bales and chopping cotton. His uniform was pressed sharp enough to cut. His boots shined like black mirrors. He believed in doing things right, even things he did not want to do, especially things he did not want to do. Behind him, Captain James Henderson emerged from the headquarters building. Henderson was 45, Brooklyn accent that no amount of military service could sand down. Silver at his temples, lines around his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and decisions that cost lives. He had been in the First War, the Great War, the one that was supposed to end all wars. It had not. "Morning, Sergeant." Henderson's voice was gravelly. "Too many cigarettes, too much coffee." Tucker, you ready for our guests? Bill turned, faced his commanding officer. Sir, ready as I'll ever be. Henderson pulled out a pack of Lucky Strikes, offered one. Bill shook his head. Henderson lit his own, drew deep, exhaled smoke that curled and died in the Louisiana heat. These are not regular prisoners, Tucker. These are U-boat commanders, officers. They sank our ships, killed our sailors. Some of them have more blood on their hands than entire infantry companies. Bill's jaw tightened. I know, sir. Do you Henderson studied him? Looked at him the way a man looks at a weapon he is not sure will fire straight. Because intelligence wants them cooperative. Not broken, not tortured, cooperative. Geneva Convention to the letter. Then we see what happens. Bill said nothing, just waited. Henderson took another drag. You lost someone. Your brother. Guadalcanal. Yes, sir. Tommy, 2nd Marines. Sniper got him in November 43. I'm sorry. Henderson's voice softened. Just a fraction. That's why you volunteered for POW duty, to look the enemy in the eye. Something like that. Bill's voice was quiet, dangerous quiet. Henderson dropped the cigarette, ground it under his boot. I need you to do something for me, Tucker. Something that goes against every instinct you have. I need you to treat these men like human beings. Can you do that? They are the enemy, sir. They were the enemy. Henderson pointed down the road. Dust cloud rising in the distance. Trucks coming. The war is over. Now they are just defeated men, and we need to figure out what to do with them. Starting with not turning them into martyrs. You understand? Bill looked at the dust cloud. Growing closer, he thought about Tommy, 19 years old, letters that stopped coming, the telegram, the rage that burned in his chest for 18 months, the hate. I understand, sir. Good. Because if you cannot handle this, I need to know now, no shame in it. This is not a job for everyone. Bill met Henderson's eyes. I can handle it, sir. Henderson nodded, turned to walk away, then stopped. One more thing, Tucker. These men have been told for years that we are monsters, that America is weak and decadent and will torture them or work them to death. Show them they were lied to. That is your real mission. Show them the truth. What truth is that, sir? That we are better than the war that made us fight. The trucks rolled in 10 minutes later. 3 of them. Canvas covered, guards on each running board with M1 Garands held ready. The convoy stopped in front of the processing barracks. Dust settled. Silence fell heavy as wet canvas. The back of the first truck opened. German officers climbed down. One by one. 18 men, gray naval uniforms. Some still crisp, some stained with salt and oil. All of them thin, too thin, eyes hollow, faces gaunt. Prisoners of war. Defeated. Done. But they still stood at attention. Old habits, military bearing, pride that would not die even when everything else had. Carl Richter was third off the truck. He was 32 years old but looked 50. Dark blonde hair going gray at the temples. Face that had once been handsome now carved down to bone. Blue eyes that had stared through periscopes at merchant ships silhouetted against dawn skies. Eyes that had watched torpedoes streak through black water toward hulls packed with fuel and food and men who would die screaming. He carried a small canvas bag. Everything he owned in the world. A spare shirt, socks with holes, a prayer book, and a letter sewn into the lining of his left boot. A letter he had read so many times the paper was thin as tissue. A letter from his wife, from Hamburg, dated April 15th, 1945. A letter that might be the last words she ever wrote. Bill watched them line up, counted. 18. All accounted for. He moved down the line with his clipboard, names, ranks, serial numbers, face after face, enemy after enemy. He kept his expression neutral, professional, but inside the hate simmered. One of them killed Tommy. Maybe not these specific men, but men like them. Submarines hunting convoys, torpedoes in the night, ships going down with all hands. Good men, American men, dying cold and alone in the Atlantic while these bastards celebrated another kill. He stopped in front of Carl Richter. Read the name on the clipboard. Hauptmann Carl Richter, U-534. He looked up, met those blue eyes. Is that you? Yes. Carl's English was accented but clear. Hauptmann Carl Richter, Commander U-Boat 534, captured May 3rd, 1945, Kattegat Strait. Bill made a notation. How many ships did you sink? Captain Carl's jaw tightened. That information is classified. The war is over. There is no more classified. How many ate? Carl's voice dropped. Commercial vessels, 3,000 tons each. Approximately. Bill did the math in his head. 8 ships, 50 men per ship minimum. 400 deaths. Give or take, he felt the rage coil tighter in his chest. He forced it down, locked it away. Henderson's words echoed. Show them the truth. My brother died on a transport in the Pacific, Bill said quietly. Japanese submarine got his convoy. Maybe one of your friends had better luck than you did. Carl said nothing, but something flickered in his eyes. Not quite regret, not quite shame. Something else. Recognition of shared loss, maybe. Acknowledgement that they had both fed men into the meat grinder of war. Follow me, Captain. Bill turned away, started walking toward the barracks. Behind him, the German officers shuffled into line. Guards on either side. Rifles ready, but not aimed. Professional. This was not an execution. This was processing. Inside the barracks, Bill explained the rules. Geneva Convention protocols. Officers did not have to work. They would receive adequate housing. 3 meals a day, medical care, recreation time, male privileges censored. The war was over. Germany had surrendered. They were prisoners, yes, but they would be treated according to international law. There is no catch, Captain Richter. Bill's voice was firm. We follow the Geneva Convention. That means we treat officer POWs with respect. So we do. Carl listened, waiting for the other shoe to drop. But it did not. Bill just handed him a blanket, a pillow, a bar of soap, showed him to a bunk in a clean barracks with screens on the windows and a roof that did not leak. Behind them, Corporal Jake Morrison watched from the doorway. Morrison was 24, Boston accent, hard eyes. His father had died on Omaha Beach, took shrapnel in the throat and drowned in his own blood before the medics could reach him. Morrison had volunteered for POW duty for the same reason Bill had, to look the enemy in the eye. But unlike Bill, Morrison had not figured out how to lock away the hate yet. You are going soft on them already, Tucker. Morrison's voice dripped contempt. Bill turned, faced him. I am following orders, Morrison. Same as you. Orders, Morrison spat into the dirt. My old man did not die so we could tuck Nazis into bed with clean sheets. Your old man died so we could win this war the right way. Bill stepped closer, lowered his voice. So we could prove we are better than them. Now stand down before I put you on report. Morrison glared, but he stepped back, walked away, left Bill standing there with the weight of it all pressing down like Louisiana humidity. That night, Carl Richter lay on his bunk and stared at the ceiling. Around him, 17 other German officers breathed in the darkness. Some snored, some wept quietly, some prayed. Carl did none of these things. He just lay there and thought about the letter in his boot. Greta, Hans, Elsa, his family, in Hamburg, or what was left of Hamburg after the firestorm bombings of 1943. He had not heard from them in over a month. The Red Cross had no information, no confirmation, no bodies, no survivors, just silence. He reached down, felt the outline of the letter through the leather. Still there, still hidden. If the Americans found it, they would read it, censor it, maybe take it away. He could not let that happen. It was all he had left. On the top bunk, Oberleutnant Friedrich Steiner stirred, 38 years old, SS liaison officer, true believer, even now, especially now. He leaned over the edge, whispered in German, Richter, are you awake? Yes. Remember who you are. Friedrich's voice was cold as Baltic ice. We are officers of the Reich, defeated, yes, captured, yes, but not broken, never broken. Do not let them seduce you with their softness. It is a trap. Carl said nothing. Do you hear me, Richter? Friedrich's hand gripped the bunk frame, white knuckles in the darkness. We will not bow to these people. We will not forget what we fought for. The war is over, Friedrich. Carl kept his voice flat. We lost. The war is never over. Not until the last German soldier stops fighting. We are prisoners in body, but our minds remain free. Our loyalty remains pure. Remember that. Friedrich rolled back onto his bunk. Silence returned, but his words hung in the air like smoke. Carl closed his eyes, thought about loyalty, about purity, about the fatherland, about everything he had believed for the past 12 years, everything he had fought for, bled for, watched friends die for. And he wondered if maybe, just maybe, it had all been a lie. Outside Louisiana, crickets sang their summer song. The night was warm, humid, alive. Somewhere in the distance, American soldiers laughed. The sound carried on the breeze, easy, relaxed, victorious. Carl listened to that laughter and felt something crack inside him. Just a hairline fracture. Nothing dramatic, but there, real. The first crack in a dam that would soon break wide open. Tomorrow would bring breakfast, and everything would change. Tomorrow he would taste bacon for the first time in 4 years. And he would learn that everything he had been told about America was a lie. Every single word. Tomorrow the war would end again. Not with bombs, not with surrender documents, but with doughnuts and tears. And the realization that kindness can be the most devastating weapon of all. But tonight Carl Richter lay in the darkness and held on to the memory of his wife's last words. Words that might be the only thing standing between him and total collapse. Words that reminded him he was still human, still capable of love, still worth saving. Even if he did not believe it yet, even if he could not see the path forward through the wreckage of everything he had once believed. The letter in his boot pressed against his ankle, paper and ink, hope and memory. A reminder that somewhere, somehow, life might still be waiting for him. If he could figure out how to deserve it, if he could learn to be something other than what the war had made him, if he could find a way to live with what he had done, tomorrow, everything would start tomorrow, with bacon and eggs and the terrible, beautiful realization that the enemy might be the only one who could save him now. Morning came to Camp Livingston the way it always did in Louisiana, slow, heavy, the sun climbing through layers of humidity until the whole world felt like breathing through wet wool. Bill Tucker was already awake, had been since 0500. Old habits, farm habits. The Army had not changed him in that regard, just pointed his discipline in a different direction. He walked toward the German officer's mess hall carrying a clipboard and a knot of tension in his gut. First breakfast, first real test. Would they eat? Would they refuse? Would they cause trouble? Henderson's orders were clear. Geneva Convention to the letter. Feed them properly. Treat them with respect. Show them what America really meant. Easy words, harder practice. The mess hall smelled like every Army mess hall Bill had ever entered. Coffee and bacon grease and institutional cleaning solution. But today it smelled like something else too. Opportunity, or maybe disaster. Hard to tell the difference sometimes. Carl Richter was fourth in line. He had barely slept. The bunk was too soft, the silence too loud. He kept expecting sirens, bombs, the screaming klaxon that meant dive, dive, dive. But none of that came. Just Louisiana crickets and American guards laughing somewhere in the distance, and the absolute strangeness of being alive when so many were dead. The line moved forward. Carl could see the serving tables ahead. Steam rising, the smell hit him like a physical force. Real food. His stomach clenched. 4 years of hunger did not disappear overnight. 4 years of sawdust bread and turnip soup and ersatz coffee that tasted like burnt dirt. 4 years of watching his men grow thinner, weaker, until some of them just stopped waking up. He reached the front of the line. An American private stood behind the counter. Young, maybe 20, red hair and freckles and an expression of careful neutrality. He did not smile, did not sneer, just served. 3 eggs, 6 strips of bacon, hash browns, toast with real butter, a cup of coffee that actually smelled like coffee. Carl stared at the plate like it was a hallucination. The private waited. Behind Carl, the line backed up. Other German officers craning their necks to see. Whispers in German, disbelief, suspicion, wonder. "You can sit down now, Captain." The private's voice was flat, not unkind, just empty of everything except professional courtesy. Carl took the tray, walked to a table, sat. The chair scraped against concrete. Around him, 17 other officers were doing the same, some moving like sleepwalkers, some shaking. Friedrich Steiner sat ramrod straight, staring at his plate with undisguised contempt. "This is a trick," Friedrich hissed in German. "They are fattening us for something. Interrogation. Torture. Do not trust this." But Carl barely heard him. He was staring at the bacon. 6 strips, crisp at the edges, still glistening with grease. The smell was intoxication. Memory. His mother's kitchen in Hamburg before the war. Sunday mornings. Breakfast with his father and his sisters. When Germany was just a country and not a crusade. When bacon was food and not a distant dream. His hands trembled as he picked up the fork. The metal felt heavy, real. He stabbed one of the eggs. Yolk broke, golden, running across the white plate like liquid promise. He raised it to his mouth. The taste exploded across his tongue. Salt, fat, protein, everything his body had been screaming for. Everything the Third Reich had stolen from him, bite by bite ration, cut by ration cut, until food became an obsession that colored every waking thought. He chewed, swallowed, reached for the bacon. The first bite of bacon unmade him. That is the only way to describe it. The crispy texture, the smoke, the salt, the fat coating his mouth, the way his entire nervous system lit up like a flare in recognition of what real nourishment felt like. He had forgotten, completely forgotten. Ersatz had replaced memory, sawdust had replaced texture, hunger had replaced everything. Karl Richter, commander of U-Boat 534, who had sent 8 merchant ships to the bottom of the Atlantic, who had killed over 400 men in the name of a government that could not even feed its own people, put his face in his hands and wept. He was not alone. Down the table, Kurt Hoffman, 24 years old, baby-faced even after the war, was crying into his eggs, tears rolling down his cheeks unchecked. Across from him, Lieutenant Hans Weber had stopped eating entirely, just sat there with his fork suspended halfway to his mouth, staring at nothing, face crumbling. Friedrich Steiner stood abruptly. His chair toppled backward with a crash that echoed through the mess hall. "Disgrace! All of you, this is shameful. Control yourselves." But no one listened, not even Friedrich's own loyalists. They were too busy eating, too busy crying, too busy confronting the reality that America had more food in one breakfast than Germany had in a week, that the enemy had been telling the truth all along, that the war had been lost before it started, that everything they had suffered for was built on lies, built on more lies, until the whole structure collapsed under the weight of simple American abundance. Bill Tucker watched from the doorway. Morrison stood next to him. Corporal Jake Morrison, who hated Germans with the purity of a man who had buried his father. Morrison, who wanted them to suffer, who wanted revenge. "Look at them," Morrison whispered. "Pathetic, crying over breakfast like children." Bill said nothing, just watched. Something was shifting in his chest. Some of the hate was draining away like water through a cracked dam. These were not monsters. These were not the fanatics he had expected. They were just hungry men, broken men, men who had believed in something and fought for something and lost everything. Just like Tommy, just like all the boys who died on both sides of a war that should never have happened. "When was the last time you went 3 years without sugar?" Bill's voice was quiet. Morrison turned to look at him. "When was the last time you ate sawdust bread and called it a meal? When was the last time you watched your friends starve to death while your government told you that you were winning? They are the enemy, Tucker. They were the enemy." Bill kept his eyes on Karl Richter, on the man crying into his hands over 6 strips of bacon. "Now they are just done, and we need to remember that, or we become what we fought against." Morrison said nothing, just walked away, his boots echoing on concrete, leaving Bill standing there with the weight of it and the smell of bacon and the sound of grown men weeping over breakfast. That afternoon, Carl sat alone in his barracks. The other officers were outside. Recreation time. They stood in the Louisiana sun and squinted at the sky and tried to process what was happening. But Carl had stayed behind. He needed to think, to calculate, to understand. He pulled out a scrap of paper, a pencil one of the guards had given him. He did the math. Breakfast had been at least 1,200 calories. Lunchroomers said sandwiches, real meat, cheese, fruit, probably another 1,000 calories. Dinner was supposed to be even bigger. Steak, someone said. Vegetables, dessert, total daily intake, 3,500 calories, maybe more, per prisoner, per day, as a matter of policy. Carl stared at the numbers. In Hamburg, civilian rations in 1944 were 300 grams of bread, mostly sawdust and potato flour, 50 grams of meat when available, usually not available, ersatz coffee that was just roasted acorns, maybe 1,000 calories on a good day, often less. His family, Greta, Hans, Elsa, they had been living on that. While he was at sea hunting convoys, believing that he was protecting them, that his sacrifice mattered, that Germany was strong and America was weak, and the fatherland would triumph because they had the will and the discipline and the superior race, all lies. Every word, America was not weak. America was so strong it could feed its prisoners better than Germany fed its citizens. America had so much abundance, it could throw away spoiled food while German children starved in bombed-out cellars. He thought about the propaganda, the newsreels, the radio broadcasts, Goebbels standing at microphones promising victory, promising that America was on the verge of collapse, that the Jewish-controlled economy was failing, that the Americans were too soft and decadent to fight a real war, that one more push would break them. One more push, one more offensive, one more sacrifice, one more winter, one more year, until there was nothing left to push with and nowhere left to push to, and the whole rotten structure came crashing down. And he had believed it. God help him, he had believed every word, because the alternative was unthinkable. The alternative meant that he had killed 400 men for nothing, that his crew had died for nothing, that the entire war was nothing but a waste, a crime, a catastrophe orchestrated by madmen and followed by fools. Carl crushed the paper in his fist, threw it across the room, put his head in his hands, not crying now, just empty, hollowed out, a shell casing after the bullet has been fired. Outside, Louisiana cicadas sang. The sound was alien, foreign, American, everything he was not, everything he could never be. A prisoner in enemy territory, a defeated man in a victorious land, a believer whose God had been revealed as a fraud. The letter in his boot pressed against his ankle. Greta's last words, the only thing keeping him tethered to sanity, to humanity, to the memory of who he had been before the uniform and the war and the lies. He reached down, felt the outline through the leather. Still there, still hidden, still his. For now. May 18th, 3 days into captivity. Bill Tucker approached the recreation yard carrying a wooden crate. The sun was high and hot, the kind of heat that made your shirt stick to your back and your thoughts slow to molasses. German officers stood in small groups, talking quietly, smoking American cigarettes they had been issued, still processing, still adjusting, still trying to understand what their new reality meant. Bill set the crate down on a bench, opened it. Inside were doughnuts, 4 dozen of them, fresh from the base bakery, glazed, powdered, chocolate frosted. The smell rose like incense, sugar and fried dough and sweetness that had been rationed out of existence for most of Europe. Captain Henderson thought you men might like something sweet. Bill's voice carried across the yard. To celebrate the end of the war in Europe, silence fell like a hammer. Every German officer turned to look. At Bill, at the crate, at the doughnuts gleaming in the Louisiana sun. Friedrich Steiner took a step forward. His face was carved from granite, eyes hard as flint. We do not celebrate our defeat. Friedrich's English was perfect, clipped, precise. We do not accept charity from our conquerors. Bill looked at him, looked at the anger and the pride and the refusal to bend. He understood it, respected it even. A man who would not break. But respect did not mean agreement. Then celebrate being alive, Captain. Bill's voice was calm. Your choice, he turned, started to walk away. The doughnuts remained on the bench, an offering, a test, a bridge or a weapon depending on who crossed it first. Carl Richter stood 15 feet away. He could smell them, the sugar, the sweetness. His mouth watered so violently he had to swallow. 3 years, maybe 4, since he had tasted real sugar, not saccharin tablets that left a metallic aftertaste, not honey stretched with chemicals. Real sugar crystallized on fried dough and offered without conditions. Friedrich hissed at him in German. Do not touch them, Richter. It is psychological warfare. Or it is just donuts, Friedrich. Karl heard his own voice saying the words, heard the rebellion in them. The first crack widening. And I am tired. I am so tired of pretending that starving makes us strong. He walked to the bench, took a glazed donut. The sugar stuck to his fingers. The dough was still warm, soft, perfect. He raised it to his mouth, bit down. The sweetness detonated in his mouth like a depth charge. Sugar melting on his tongue. Dough soft and rich with real flour and real eggs and real butter. Everything the Third Reich had taken away, everything they had told him was decadent and unnecessary and weak. Everything that made life worth living instead of just surviving. Karl closed his eyes. For 5 seconds, he was not a prisoner. Not a defeated enemy, not a man who had killed hundreds. He was just a human being eating a donut, tasting sweetness, remembering what it felt like to be fed instead of hungry. And for the second time in 3 days, he wept. Not quietly this time. Great heaving sobs that shook his shoulders and broke something fundamental inside him. All the grief he had locked away. All the loss, all the lies. Coming out in salt water and sugar, and the terrible recognition that kindness could hurt more than cruelty ever could. Behind him, Kurt Hoffman grabbed 2 donuts, tears already streaming. Hans Weber took one with shaking hands. Down the line, 12 of 18 German officers broke ranks, walked to the crate, took donuts, ate them, cried. Friedrich Steiner and 5 others remained standing, rigid, refusing. But even they watched with eyes that betrayed hunger and longing and the slow erosion of certainty. Bill Tucker stood 50 yards away, Morrison next to him, Morrison who wanted blood, Morrison who wanted them to suffer. Jesus Christ, Morrison breathed. They are crying over donuts. Bill said nothing for a long moment, just watched grown men weep over sugar, over kindness, over the simple recognition that maybe the enemy was not what they had been told either, that maybe propaganda cut both ways, that maybe the war had lied to everyone. When is the last time you went 3 years without sugar? Bill's voice was soft, distant, like he was talking to himself. When is the last time sweetness was a memory instead of a right? They are the enemy, Tucker. But Morrison's voice had less conviction now, less certainty. They were the enemy. Now they are just men eating donuts. And maybe that is what victory actually looks like. Not corpses, not revenge, just the space to be human again. From his office window, Captain Henderson watched, made a notation in his logbook, smiled. Not a happy smile, not triumphant, just satisfied. The way a man smiles when a gamble pays off, when an experiment yields results, when kindness proves to be the most devastating weapon after all. Because Henderson understood something that took most men a lifetime to learn. You could not defeat an ideology with bullets. Bullets just made martyrs, made myths, made the next generation of fanatics. But you could defeat an ideology by proving it was built on lies, by showing men that everything they had been told was false, that the enemy was not a monster but a mirror, that maybe, just maybe, there was another way to live. The donuts were not charity, they were ammunition, aimed at the heart of everything the Third Reich had built. And judging by the tears in the recreation yard, they had hit their target dead center. Karl Richter stood in the Louisiana sun with sugar on his fingers and salt on his face, and felt the last pillars of his belief system crumble to dust. The fatherland had starved him. America had fed him. The Reich had lied to him. The enemy had told him the truth with bacon and eggs and donuts. And now he had to figure out what to do with that knowledge, how to live with it, how to be something other than what he had been, how to deserve the kindness that was killing him more surely than any bullet ever could. The donut in his hand was half eaten. He looked at it, really looked at it, saw in it everything that mattered. Abundance, generosity, the choice to feed instead of starve, to build instead of destroy, to offer sweetness to men who had spent years in bitterness. This, he thought, it is what defeat tastes like, and it is better than any victory I ever knew. Behind him, Friedrich Steiner stood rigid, furious, watching his men break one by one, watching the careful propaganda of years dissolve in sugar and tears. He would not break, could not break, because if he broke, then everything was lost. Every death was meaningless. Every sacrifice was wasted. Every moment of suffering was for nothing. So he stood, alone, unbroken, the last true believer in a religion whose God had been revealed as a monster, and he watched his congregation fall away, seduced by enemy kindness, destroyed by American donuts, and he began to plan. Because if kindness was a weapon, then he would find a way to make cruelty a shield. If they would not stay loyal willingly, he would force them to stay loyal. He would remind them what they were, what they had fought for, what they owed to the fallen. He would not let them forget, even if it meant blood, even if it meant betrayal, even if it meant proving that the old ways were the only ways. That strength mattered more than sweetness. That loyalty mattered more than truth. The war was not over. Not for Friedrich Steiner. It had only changed battlefields. And this time the enemy would not win with donuts. This time he would make sure of that. Even if he had to kill every weak fool who had forgotten what it meant to be a soldier of the Reich. The sun beat down, the cicadas sang, the American guards laughed somewhere in the distance. And in the recreation yard of Camp Livingston, Louisiana, two wars began. One that would be won with kindness, and one that would be fought with knives in the dark. Carl Richter finished his donut, wiped his eyes, looked at Bill Tucker across 50 yards of Louisiana dust. Their eyes met, German and American, enemy and enemy. Two men who had killed for their countries and bled for their flags and now stood on opposite sides of a peace that neither fully understood yet. Bill nodded, just once. Acknowledgement. Respect. The beginning of something that had no name yet. Carl nodded back. The gesture felt monumental, like signing a treaty, like crossing a border, like choosing a side in a war that had not been declared yet, but everyone could feel coming. The wind picked up, carried the smell of sugar and pine trees in the Mississippi River rolling south through America's heartland. Carl breathed it in, this foreign air, this enemy land, this place that fed him better than his own country ever had. And he wondered what Greta would think. If she was still alive to think anything. If Hamburg still stood. If his children still breathed. If there was anything left to go home to except rubble and graves and the ash of everything he had believed. The letter in his boot pressed against his ankle. Tomorrow he would read it again. Tomorrow he would remember why he had to survive this. Why he had to figure out how to live in a world where the enemy showed more mercy than his own government. Where kindness was more dangerous than cruelty. Where a donut could break a man more completely than any interrogation. Tomorrow, everything would become clearer tomorrow. Or maybe more confusing. Hard to tell the difference anymore. Hard to know which way was up when your entire world had been turned inside out and shaken until nothing made sense. But tonight, Carl Richter would sleep with the taste of sugar on his tongue. And for the first time in 4 years, he would dream of something other than drowning. June 7th. Dawn broke over Camp Livingston like a promise or a threat. Hard to tell which. The air smelled of pine sap and coming rain. Storm clouds gathering in the west. Heavy, dark. The kind that turned Louisiana dirt roads into rivers of red mud and made smart men seek shelter. Bill Tucker was not seeking shelter. He was standing in the shadow of the armory building with 12 armed guards, waiting, watching. The trap was set. Now they just had to see if the rats would take the bait. 3 days earlier, Carl Richter had come to him, late, after lights out, found Bill doing paperwork in the administration building. The German captain had looked like a man walking to his own execution, face pale, hands shaking, but his voice had been steady. Sergeant Tucker, I need to speak with you, privately. Bill had known immediately something was wrong, something big. He had closed the door, locked it, sat down across from Carl, waited, let the silence stretch. Let the German gather his courage or his betrayal or whatever it was that brought him here in the dark. Carl had told him everything. Friedrich Steiner's escape plot, the plan to steal weapons from the armory, to kill guards, specifically to kill Bill Tucker because Bill represented everything Friedrich hated. Kindness as weakness, mercy as betrayal, the American way as corruption of true German strength, the timeline. June 7th. Morning work detail. When half the guards would be busy with the larger prisoner population. When the armory would be minimally staffed. When escape south to Mexico seemed possible if you were desperate enough or crazy enough or both. Bill had listened without interrupting. When Carl finished, the silence between them was heavier than before, weighted with choice and consequence in the knowledge that this moment would define everything that came after. You are ratting out your own men. Bill's voice had been flat, not accusing, just stating fact. Carl had met his eyes. They are not my men anymore. I will not let more people die for Nazi lies. After what I saw, after Buchenwald and Dachau and Bergen-Belsen, after learning that I fought for monsters who murdered millions. Sergeant, I have to believe there is a way to be German without being a monster. And that starts with doing the right thing now. Bill had believed him, not because Carl's words were particularly convincing, but because of the way he said them. Like a man confessing sins, like a man trying to save his own soul by betraying everything he had once stood for, like a man choosing humanity over loyalty and knowing the gusto. They had reported to Henderson, planned the trap, kept Carl's involvement secret, protected him from revenge, from the other prisoners who might see betrayal instead of redemption, from Friedrich's loyalists who would kill him given half a chance. And now it was June 7th, dawn, storm coming. And Bill Tucker was about to find out if kindness was worth killing for. The work detail assembled at 0600, 40 German prisoners, 15 guards, Morrison among them, Corporal Jake Morrison, who hated Germans with the purity of unexamined grief, who carried his father's death like a weapon, who wanted blood. Bill watched Friedrich Steiner through binoculars. The German SS officer moved with careful nonchalance. Too careful, too casual. 4 other men clustered near him. Heinrich Vogel, Otto Krause, Werner Schmidt, Ernst Becker, all hardliners, all true believers, all willing to die rather than accept that the war was truly over. They drifted toward the armory storage building, a wooden structure set apart from the main compound, used for equipment, tools, spare uniforms. And in the back room behind a locked door that Friedrich had somehow gotten a key for rifles, ammunition, grenades, everything you needed to turn a prison break into a bloodbath. Bill keyed his radio. All units, targets are moving. Hold position until my signal. Static, then Henderson's voice. Roger that. Remember, Tucker? We take them alive if possible. We are not executioners. Bill did not respond, just watched Friedrich and his men slip around the corner of the building, out of sight of the main guard tower. Moving fast now, no more pretense. This was it. The moment of truth. He gave them 60 seconds. Let them get inside. Let them think they had succeeded. Let them reach for the weapons. Then he moved. Hand signal. 12 guards flowing out of cover like water. Silent, professional, surrounding the building, cutting off escape routes. Bill reached the door first. Could hear voices inside. German. Excited. Friedrich giving orders. The scrape of wood on concrete. Rifle bolts clicking. The sounds of men who thought they were about to win. Bill kicked the door open. Splinters flying, hinges screaming. 12 M1 Guerrillas snapping up to point at 5 shocked faces. Friedrich Stein frozen with a rifle halfway to his shoulder. His men scattering. Reaching for weapons. Making the worst decision of their lives. Freeze. Hands up. Bill's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Drop the weapons. Now. For a split second, everything hung in perfect balance. 5 German officers, 12 American guards, weapons everywhere. Death breathing in the space between heartbeats. Then Friedrich made his choice. He swung the rifle up, toward Bill, his face twisted with rage and righteousness, and the absolute certainty that dying for the Reich was better than living in defeat. His finger found the trigger, started to squeeze. Morrison's rifle cracked. Single shot, perfect shot. Friedrich's shoulder exploded in red mist. The German officer spun, dropped, the rifle clattering away across concrete. His men froze, hands up, surrendering. Too late for bravery now that their leader was bleeding on the floor. Bill moved forward, kicked the weapons away, checked Friedrich, still alive, bleeding heavy but not arterial. He would live. Unfortunately or fortunately, depending on your perspective. Guards swarmed in, securing the prisoners, calling for medics. The whole thing over in less than 30 seconds. Friedrich looked up at Bill, blood between his teeth, eyes full of hate. Traitor. Someone betrayed us. His English was slurred with pain but clear enough. Who was it? Richter. It was Richter. That coward. Bill said nothing, just stood there looking down at a man who would rather die than change, who would rather kill than accept that maybe the war had been wrong from the start, who represented everything Bill had been taught to fight against. You betrayed yourself, Captain Steiner. Bill's voice was quiet, sad almost. The war is over. You just could not accept it. Morrison stood in the doorway, rifle still smoking, his face white, hands shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. He had killed men before, in combat, in the heat of battle. But this was different. This was after. This was looking a man in the eye and pulling the trigger to save someone else, to save Bill Tucker specifically, to choose protection over revenge. Something had shifted in Morrison's face. Some of the hate had drained away, replaced by exhaustion, by the recognition that killing did not feel as good as he thought it would. That revenge was a hollow victory, that maybe Tucker had been right all along. The medics arrived, loaded Friedrich onto a stretcher. The other four conspirators were cuffed, marched away. Friedrich kept screaming, in German now, calling them cowards, calling them traitors, calling down the vengeance of a Reich that no longer existed on men who no longer listened. Henderson appeared, surveyed the scene, nodded approval. Good work, Sergeant. Clean, professional, exactly what I wanted. Thank you, sir. Bill holstered his sidearm. What happens to them now? Steiner and his conspirators will be transferred to Fort Leavenworth. Maximum security. They will face a military tribunal. Likely spend the rest of the war crimes trials in a cell. Henderson paused. The rest of the prisoners are cleared, thanks to our source. Bill met Henderson's eyes. His identity stays protected. Absolutely. Henderson's voice was iron. Captain Richter took a tremendous risk. We will honor that. He gets to go home with a clear conscience and no target on his back. Carl Richter stood in the main yard with the other prisoners, watching guards rush toward the armory, hearing the single rifle shot, knowing what it meant, knowing that his choice had just been validated or condemned depending on how you looked at it. Hans Weber moved close, whispered in German. That was the escape attempt. You knew. You told them. It was not a question. Hans was too smart for that. Carl looked at him, met his eyes, said nothing. But his silence was answer enough. Good. Hans's voice was firm, quiet. Friedrich was a monster. You did the right thing. Did I? Carl's voice cracked. I betrayed fellow Germans, fellow officers, men I served with. You betrayed Nazis. Hans put a hand on Carl's shoulder. There is a difference, and someday we will all have to choose which one we were. You chose well. That evening, Bill found Carl sitting alone behind the barracks. Louisiana sunset painting the sky red and gold and purple. Storm had passed without breaking, just rumbled off to the east, leaving the air clean and cool. Rare gift in Louisiana summer. Bill sat down next to him, did not speak immediately, just sat. Let the silence do the work. Finally, Carl broke it. Did anyone die? Numbered. Bill pulled out a pack of Lucky Strikes. Offered one. Carl took it. First cigarette in 4 years that was not a German ration. Bill lit both. They smoked in silence for a moment. Steiner took a bullet to the shoulder. Morrison shot. Clean. Professional. He will live to stand trial. Good. Carl's voice was hollow. I did not want more death, even his. Bill exhaled smoke, watched it drift away on the breeze. You did the right thing, Captain. Saved lives, American and German both. I betrayed my own men. You saved your own men. From themselves, from Friedrich's madness. Bill turned to look at him. That took more courage than fighting, believe me. Carl said nothing, just smoked, stared at the sunset, thought about courage and betrayal and the thin line between them. Thought about Greta, about Hans and Elsa, about whether they would understand, whether they would forgive, whether he would ever see them again to ask. Bill reached into his jacket, pulled out a telegram. Red Cross seal. He held it out. Carl stared at it like it was a live grenade. His hands would not move, could not move. Terror paralyzed him. If this was bad news, if his family was dead, if the last 3 years had been for nothing. Take it, Carl. Bill's voice was gentle. It is good news. I promise. Carl's hand moved, slow, shaking. He took the telegram, unfolded it, read. The words blurred, came back into focus, blurred again. Tears, relief, joy so intense it hurt. Greta Richter, Hans Richter, age 8. Elsa Richter, age 5. Confirmed alive. Hamburg Displaced Persons Center. Condition fair. Awaiting contact. Carl's knees gave out. He dropped to the ground, the telegram fluttering from his hands, sobbing. Great heaving cries that came from somewhere deeper than lungs, deeper than heart, from the place where hope lives or dies, where faith fights despair, where a man keeps the memory of his family alive through 4 years of war and terror, and the absolute certainty that they are dead. They made it. Bill's hand on Carl's shoulder, heavy, warm, anchor to reality. Captain, they made it. Carl could not speak, could not breathe, could only cry. Relief and grief and guilt and joy all mixed together until he did not know which emotion was which. Just knew that his family was alive, that his wife and children had survived the firestorms and the starvation and the collapse of everything, that somewhere in the ruins of Hamburg they were waiting, hoping, believing he might still come home. Bill sat with him, did not try to stop the tears, did not tell him to pull himself together, just sat, present, witness to a man breaking apart and putting himself back together in a new configuration, one that might actually work this time. When Carl could finally speak, his voice was raw. How can I ever repay you? Bill was quiet for a long moment. Then, help me prove that this war was not for nothing. Show other Germans what I showed you. What is that? That the American way, freedom, dignity, kindness, actually works. That it is not weakness. That mercy is strength. That maybe there is a way forward that does not involve more death. Carl looked at him, really looked at him. Saw not an enemy, not a conqueror, but a man, a good man, who had lost a brother and learned to forgive, who had every reason to hate and chose kindness instead, who represented the best of what America could be. I will. Carl's voice was steady now. I swear it. I will spend the rest of my life proving it. Their hands clasped, German and American, former enemies, new friends, brothers in a way that transcended nationality or uniform or the weight of history. Two men who had chosen humanity over hate, and in doing so had won a war that most people did not even know was being fought. June 15th, Henderson called a formation. All German prisoners assembled. Guards around the perimeter. The sun beat down. Men sweated in their uniforms. Waited for news. Hoped for good news. Feared the worst. Henderson stood on a wooden platform. Tall, authoritative, but not cruel. Never cruel. He cleared his throat. Gentlemen, I have received orders from Washington regarding your repatriation. You will be returned to Germany by the end of August. Ships have been allocated. Processing will begin next week. You will be going home. Mixed reactions rippled through the formation. Some men smiled, relieved. Home meant family, meant rebuilding, meant starting over. Others looked afraid. Home meant ruins, meant starvation, meant facing what they had done, what had been done in their name. Carl felt both, relief that he would see Greta again, fear of what Hamburg had become, uncertainty about what role he could play in a defeated Germany, what future existed for a U-boat commander whose navy was at the bottom of the Atlantic. After the formation broke, Henderson called Carl to his office. Bill was there, also 5 other German prisoners, Hans Weber, Kurt Hoffmann, 3 others, all moderate, all reasonable, all men who had shown capacity for change. Henderson sat behind his desk, hands folded, expression serious. Gentlemen, I have a proposition for you. What I am about to offer is voluntary. You can say no without consequence, but I hope you will say yes. Carl waited, heart pounding. This felt important, monumental. Henderson leaned forward. The United States Military Intelligence Division is establishing a cultural liaison program. We need German officers who understand both the old regime and the new reality, who can work with occupation forces, who can help rebuild Germany the right way, with democracy, with freedom, with American values as a model. He paused, let that sink in, then continued. You would return to Germany, reunite with your families, but instead of being released as regular prisoners, you would work for us, for the occupation government, as translators, educators, mediators between German civilians and American forces. You would help win the peace. Karl's mind raced. Return home, get paid, help rebuild, teach democracy, work with Americans instead of against them. It sounded too good to be true. There had to be a catch. Why us? Karl's voice was careful. What did we do to earn this? Henderson smiled, thin, knowing. You chose humanity over ideology, Captain Richter. When it mattered, when it was hard. You proved that former enemies can become allies. That change is possible. That maybe there is hope for Germany after all. We need more men like you. Karl looked at Bill. Bill nodded, encouraging, believing. Karl looked at Hans. Hans's eyes were bright, excited. This was a chance, a real chance. Not just to survive, but to help, to matter, to make amends for the crimes committed in Germany's name. I accept. Karl's voice was firm. I want to help. I want to prove that Germany can be better. Must be better. Henderson stood, extended his hand. Welcome to the program, Captain Richter. Let us change the world. August 1st, 1945. Departure Day. The sun rose over Camp Livingston one last time for Karl Richter. He stood with his small canvas bag, everything he owned, a spare shirt, the prayer book, the letter from Greta finally out of his boot carried in his breast pocket near his heart where it belonged. Around him, 18 German officers prepared to board trucks that would take them to ships that would take them home. Most were going back as regular civilians, but Karl and 4 others wore different expressions. Not just hope, but purpose, mission, the weight of responsibility that came with being chosen for something bigger. Bill Tucker stood by the gate, watching them load up. He had said his goodbyes to most of them. Simple, professional. But Karl was different. Karl he had saved, and been saved by. A bond that went deeper than prisoner and guard, deeper than German and American. Karl walked over. They stood facing each other. 2 men who had been enemies and became friends, who had fought different wars and won the same peace. Remember what I taught you about America? Bill's voice was gruff, emotional despite himself. Remember what you taught me about humanity? Karl's eyes were wet. You saved my life, Sergeant. Not just from death, from becoming a monster, from staying a monster. You gave me a chance to be human again. You saved mine too, Captain. Bill's hand shot out. Karl took it, shook, then pulled him into an embrace. Unexpected, unplanned, but necessary. They held each other. 2 warriors, 2 survivors, 2 men who had learned that courage was not killing. It was choosing not to. Bill pulled back, handed Karl a package, wrapped in brown paper, tied with string, for when you forget what hope tastes like. Karl opened it. Inside, a jar of Louisiana honey, a pack of doughnuts carefully preserved, stale but still sweet, and a small American flag, folded neat and proper, stars and stripes that had once meant enemy, that now meant something else, something better. I will never forget. Karl's voice broke. Thank you for everything. The truck engine started. Time to go. Karl climbed aboard, looked back at Camp Livingston one last time, at the wooden barracks, at the mess hall where he had tasted bacon and wept, at the recreation yard where a donut had broken him open and let the light in. He looked at Bill Tucker, standing there, hand raised in farewell, and Karl understood something profound. Defeat was not the end. Defeat was the beginning, the chance to rebuild, to become better, to prove that humanity was stronger than ideology, that kindness was stronger than hate. The trucks rolled out, down red dirt roads, through pine forests, toward ships, toward home, toward a future nobody could predict, but everyone hoped might be better than the past. June 1970, 25 years later. Camp Livingston was a historical site now. Closed in 1955. converted to a memorial park, a place where veterans came to remember, to reflect, to tell stories about the last good war, the war that had clear enemies and clear victories and clear moral lessons. The Louisiana Veterans Association had organized a reunion. World War II veterans, American, German, Japanese even, a gathering of old warriors. Gray now, slower, but still carrying the weight of what they had done, what they had seen, what they had become. Bill Tucker was 52, retired from teaching. 3 years ago, he had left the classroom where he had taught American history to Georgia farm kids who did not care much about dates and battles, but loved stories about courage and sacrifice and doing the right thing even when it was hard. He walked across the grounds, Sarah beside him, his wife of 23 years, good woman, patient woman, who understood when he woke up at night thinking about Tommy, thinking about the war, thinking about men he had known and lost and saved. Their son, Tommy Jr., walked behind them, 20 years old, long hair, jeans, everything Bill's generation had not been, but a good kid, smart, questioning, the way young people should be, the way America stayed strong, by questioning, by improving, by never accepting that the old ways were the only ways. A car pulled into the lot, German plates, rental probably. The door opened. A man stepped out, older, gray, lined face. But Bill knew him immediately, would have known him anywhere, even after 25 years. Some faces you do not forget. Some bonds do not break. Carl Richter, 57, professor of American history at the University of Hamburg, author of 3 books on democracy and Reconstruction, father of 2 grown children, husband to the same woman who had written him a letter in April 1945 and saved his sanity. Their eyes met across 50 yards of Louisiana grass. Both men froze, then smiled. Huge grins that split their faces and erased 25 years in an instant. They walked toward each other, then ran. Old men running like boys, meeting in the middle, embracing, crying, laughing, holding each other like lost brothers finally found. I cannot believe you came. Bill's voice was muffled against Carl's shoulder. I could not miss this. Carl pulled back, looked at him. You look old, my friend. You look older. Both laughing now, the ice broken, the years collapsed. They caught up, rapid fire. Carl's life, working with occupation forces 1945 to 1955, teaching after that. 3 generations of German students learning about American democracy, about the Marshall Plan, about the kindness that rebuilt Europe, about Doughnuts that defeated Nazis. Bill's life, teaching too, small-town Georgia, raising kids, telling stories about the war, about German prisoners who became friends, about choosing humanity over hate, about proving that America's greatest weapon was not bombs but values. The reunion organizers called them to the main pavilion. 200 veterans gathered, American, German, a few Japanese, all old now, all survivors, all carriers of memory, of witness, of the knowledge that war was hell, but peace was possible. Bill and Carl were asked to speak, together, representative of something larger than themselves. They stood at the podium, side by side, former enemies, current friends, living proof that change was real. Bill spoke first. 25 years ago, I hated Germans, all of them. My brother died in this war. I wanted revenge. Then I met Captain Carl Richter, and he taught me that the enemy is not a people, it is an ideology. We defeated Nazi Germany, but we won the peace by showing kindness, by proving that American values were not empty propaganda, but lived reality. Carl took the microphone. I was taught that Americans were weak, decadent, inferior. Then an American sergeant gave me a donut, and in that simple act he defeated every lie I had been told. The greatest weapon in World War II was not the atomic bomb. It was the values this nation stands for. You did not just defeat us, you redeemed us. You showed us a better way. And millions of Germans are grateful. The room erupted. Standing ovation, 200 old warriors on their feet, clapping, some crying, veterans who remembered, who understood, who knew that winning the war was important, but winning the peace was everything. Bill and Carl stood together, hands clasped, raised above their heads. Victory, not over each other, but over hate, over ideology, over the forces that divided humanity into us and them. They had won, not with bullets, but with bacon and donuts in the simple revolutionary act of treating enemies like human beings. The freeze frame captured them there. Two men, two flags, one message. That kindness was strength. That mercy was victory. That the American way was not perfect, but it was real. And it worked. When you let it. When you chose it. When you believed in it enough to offer donuts to men who had killed your brothers. Epilogue. Sergeant William Tucker died in 1989. Heart attack, quick, painless. The way old warriors hope to go. Carl Richter spoke at his funeral. Told the story about the donut, about the kindness that saved his soul, about the friend who proved that enemies could become brothers if you were brave enough to try. Carl continued teaching until 1995, 50 years of educating Germans about democracy, about America, about the values that rebuilt Europe after the most devastating war in human history. 3 generations learned from him, thousands of students, all carrying the story forward, the lesson forward, the hope forward. Of the 400,000 German prisoners held in America during World War II, over 5,000 chose to immigrate after the war, became Americans, became citizens of the country that had defeated them and then fed them and then offered them a future. They became living bridges, proof that the American experiment worked. That diversity was strength, that enemies could become family. Camp Livingston closed in 1955. Today a plaque stands on the site, bronze, weathered, words carved deep. Here during World War II, enemies became friends. In victory, America chose kindness. In defeat, Germany found redemption. In the end, humanity triumphed over hate. Modern day, Tommy Tucker Jr. visits that plaque with his grandson. The boy is 10, curious, sharp, asks questions the way kids do. Grandpa, is it true your dad was friends with a Nazi? Tommy Jr. kneels down, looks his grandson in the eye. No, son. My dad was friends with a German who learned he had been lied to. There is a difference. And that difference is what makes America great. Not our weapons, not our wealth, but our willingness to see enemies as human beings, to offer second chances, to prove that kindness is not weakness. It is the strongest thing in the world. The boy thinks about that, nuns, looks at the plaque. Can we come back here? We can come back anytime you want. Tommy Jr. stands, puts his hand on his grandson's shoulder. This is your history too. Remember it, learn from it, pass it on. They walk away. Grandfather and grandson, American, through and through, carrying forward the legacy of Bill Tucker and Carl Richter, of donuts that defeated Nazis, of kindness that won wars, of the simple truth that had taken humanity 10,000 years to learn and kept forgetting every generation. That we are all human, all worthy, all deserving of dignity and second chances and the opportunity to be better than our worst moments. That is the American way. Not perfect, not always practiced, but always possible, always within reach, always worth fighting for. That is what the last good war taught us. That victory is not just defeating the enemy, it is making them your friend. It is proving that your values are worth emulating. It is winning the peace and the hearts and the minds. That is what Bill Tucker and Carl Richter proved. 2 men, 2 nations, 1 donut at a time. And that is a legacy worth remembering, worth honoring, worth passing down to every generation that comes after. So they know, so they remember, so they never forget what we fought for, what we won, and how we won it. Not with hate, but with hope. Not with cruelty, but with kindness. Not with revenge, but with redemption. That is America, at its best, at its truest, at its most powerful. And that will always be worth fighting for. Always. The end.